you have to go in knowing why you're doing it. I'm doing this because this is what God has called me to do. Not necessarily I'm doing this in hopes that this person will get on their knees and beg me for forgiveness.
Yeah.
That might not happen.
That might not happen.
It might not happen.
That's very good, right? So be obedient to the word, not because you think it's going to give you a preferred outcome.
Right.
You be obedient because obedience is the preferred outcome.
My name is Caroline, and I'm a counselor.
My name is Brett, and I'm a pastor.
And together, we're tackling difficult topics from a biblical perspective.
Welcome to There We Said It. All right. Hey, welcome to There We Said It. We're kicking off this podcast today. My name is Brett, and I'm here with
Caroline.
And so, Caroline, we're kicking off this podcast.
So excited.
To bring hope. So, I'm sure there's probably someone listening to this wondering, how did these two kind of come upon this idea? Maybe give them a little background on how this thing got started.
Yeah. Okay. So, Brett walked into my office.
Yes, I did. Full disclosure, I gave her full permission to share this story. So
I am a biblical counselor. Brett walked into my office for a few sessions. Nothing major. He's good.
Yeah.
And we just had great conversations, banter kind of back and forth, really just got in depth on stuff. And I think after most sessions, we would be like, we should have recorded that.
Yeah.
That was just a really great conversation. And so I had mentioned to Brett way back then that I always wanted to do a podcast. And I can talk. I'm really great at talking. I am not good at this whole recording and all of that stuff.
So far, so good.
I know. Oh, thanks. And he said, I got a church that's got all that stuff. And we just kind of left it at that.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later?
Yeah, something like that.
God just started he kind of does this. I feel like he just kind of taps me on the head and says, hey, remember that podcast thing? So I emailed Brett and said, hey, you want to talk about that podcast?
Yeah. And 3 months later, here we are.
And God has literally opened every door just so wide. And I'm still, even right now, sitting here in awe of we're doing this.
Yeah.
We're doing this. Super stoked.
I remember when you hit me up and said, hey, this podcast I really think could bring people hope.
Yeah.
And for me, when I heard that, I immediately thought about how much I love and how much I think you love to introduce people to Jesus in organic and relational ways.
100%.
And to rewrite the narratives that people have about Christians, Christian leaders, Christian theory, doctrine, you name it.
Yeah.
I feel like people have a lot of opinions and have heard a lot of things about that, but often it's the wrong things. And so I think, Christian perspective or Christians in general get painted in this really dark light.
Yeah.
And what I'm really encouraged by, and I believe we're going to be able to do with some fun and laughter and truth is, talk about these things as two people who are struggling through our own things in life, but are anchored to Christ, are trying our best to follow his precepts for how to live.
Yep.
And everything in between.
Yep.
And so, that's kind of the genesis. And, it's interesting. You said, Brett walked into my office. Don't worry, he was fine. When I walked into your office, I was not fine. In fact,
I didn't want to say that, though.
No,
I wanted to let you
can say it.
yourself.
You can say it. It's fine. I was not fine. I had just went through a very difficult season. Today's episode is about church hurt.
Yeah.
And what do we do when people or the church, Christians, right? We're the people who are supposed to help us hurt us. And I hear that all the time as a pastor. You hear that all the time as a counselor.
Right.
Talk about it with people. And that was what brought me in through, your doors. I had just recently went through a really difficult time where I was very hurt by the actions and words and activities of someone I thought, was a friend in Christ. And I was spiraling emotionally. On the outside, I had a good face on. Everything was good. But on the inside, I was just feeling anger. I think if you go deeper, I think there was some insecurity. I think there was resentment. I think there was contempt. And all those words are not good words, right? They're gunpowder words that when you build them up and light a match, some point they're going to blow up. And so I had just taken the church through a series on mental health.
Okay.
And that was awesome to kind of pull the lid back off of that. But my encouragement to the church and to the staff I lead was to invest in your mental health. Go talk to somebody. If it's not here under our TP of counseling, then go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so that was me putting my, kind of application into action and taking my own advice and doing it. And it wasn't easy. I'm glad I did it. But that's how it all came together. So, I think there's a lot of people who are out there that are struggling with church hurt.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point, too, to start off with, of church hurt isn't just the people attending the church who get hurt, but they can hurt leadership, too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's a good distinction. It's not just, we're talking about, Christians who got hurt by other Christians. If you are a leader of a ministry, if you're a pastor, just understand, even as a person who attends a church, leadership gets hurt.
Yeah.
Yep. We were talking before the podcast went live that, Caroline asked me if I had ever been hurt by, do I have church hurt? And I said, from the time I became a Christian and started attending church to today, the really maybe minus one or two stories where someone who didn't love Jesus went out of their way to try to pick on me or, make fun of me or something. I mean, very limited. That does not happen much. I would say 98.5% of the stories I have of pain are directly from Christians, and they're directly from the churches I've served.
Wow.
Now, that sounds messed up.
No, it doesn't sound messed up. That is messed up.
Come on.
That is messed up.
That is messed up.
I mean, right? We are to love one another. I mean, that's the greatest commandment, right? Mm-hmm. Love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. And if we, as Christians, are hurting one another, I mean, we have an audience watching us. Right. The non-Christians. Yeah. And you wonder why people don't want to get into that, because all they're seeing is these Christians going at each other and hurting one another.
Mm. Yeah, amen. I came across a statistic from Barna, a research company, in 2010, did a poll and said, for those, the context of the poll exactly escapes me, but it had to do with they polled people, and 4 out of 10 people said they would never go to church because of the hurt they had received from the church they had attended prior.
Right.
So 40% of people that they talked to were like, hey, I still am interested in church, but I won't walk through the doors of another church because of something that happened. And the other thing that they found, it wasn't like these are things that happened just a week ago. Yeah. This may have been a decade ago.
Okay.
So that pain, whatever happened, however it happened,
yep, has
kept them outside of community and fellowshipping with other Christians because of that pain that took place.
Yeah. Well, when you're hurt in the church, especially if you're hurt by someone in leadership, right, that's a traumatic event, because this is someone that you trust. This is someone who is, quote unquote, supposed to treat you right and have your best interest at heart. And so when they hurt you, there's betrayal there.
Yeah. There's
some serious betrayal there. And you can't just move on from that. You have to heal from that. Mm-hmm. And whether that be reading a book, listening to podcasts, getting professional help, you're not gonna want to walk back into another church, because walking back into another church is going to trigger that hurt and that trauma all over again. Yeah. And then also to that person to remember that we call it church hurt. It's not the church. It's the people in it that hurt you.
Talk about that.
Well, I mean, the church is the people as a whole, right? Or it's the building. First of all, a building can't hurt you unless it falls on you.
Sure.
Which could happen.
So when people say, the church hurt me, right, it often sounds like the whole church hurt me.
Right.
But it's typically just an individual or a couple individuals in the church hurt you.
Exactly.
So then why do you think people don't say, when they try to describe, you used to go to church, you don't go to church anymore. Yeah, the church hurt me. Do you think they don't say names because it feels too putting people out there, or why do you think people don't just name it for what it is?
Well, I think one reason is it's easy to say the church as a whole, because then that's a collective and I can just shove it all away and be like, I'm done with it as a whole. It's a lot harder to name a person, right? Because then there's the thing to deal with.
Right.
I can't deal with the whole church. I can't take on the whole church.
Yeah.
And make them better. But if I say this person hurt me, then people are automatically going to start telling me, well, you need to go to that person.
Right.
You need to make it right. They don't want to do that.
No.
That's hard.
Yeah, it gives a point of reference to also verify, like, is your story what it is? Because I've seen that on the other side too. People are like, I left the church because the church hurt me. Well, there were some things you did at that church that brought about conflict that, yes, when it was brought to your attention, maybe it wasn't done in the right way, but your own actions hurt people that actually brought hurt upon you as well. So it's interesting when you really get down to the nitty gritty. I think you're exactly on it. It's easier to keep it general, just say, yeah, the church hurt me. The downside of that, of course, is that when people hear that, they indict the entirety of the church.
Yeah.
Like all the churches are like this, not just this guy's church, because that's the narrative I think that we hear in culture. Like, when we hear about abuses, which are terrible, they should be punished to the full extent of the law. Those leaders should be removed. There should be absolute extreme measures taken. But what I think society does and media does really great is they paint this picture like that's every church.
Yeah.
This is just what churches do. This individual just got caught, but this happens all the time. This is what they do.
Right.
And it's like, no. It's not what we do. I've never done that. I've never been interested in doing that. I've never worked with anybody that's ever been interested in abusing or hurting somebody. Like, that's not what we do. And then, it's frustrating because all the good things we do never get talked about.
Right. So let me bring it down to another level here and saying that pride speaks in generalities. Humility speaks in specifics. So bringing that to this is a prideful person will just be like, the church hurt me.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to be general about it. But when you get to being humble and you grasp that humility, then you can say specifically, this person hurt me.
Yeah.
That's bringing you to a whole nother place. It's easy to walk around and just be like puffed up with your pride and like, well, the church hurt me, so forget the church. I'm never going back.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder and deeper to say specifically, this is exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's good. I think another thing I hear often in ministry, you might hear this too, when people say, I'm a Christian, but I don't go to church.
Yeah. Oh, all the time.
Right. Hear that all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
I believe in God.
Yeah.
But I don't go to church.
Yep. And yeah, so, so we hear that and sometimes tied to it is, I believe in, I'm a Christian, but, I don't do the church thing because that didn't go over so well, last time I tried it. What are those moments like when someone comes into your office and you're counseling them and that's kind of their take is, I can be a Christian, which, theologically speaking, they absolutely can be a Christian. It doesn't, you don't have to be a part of a gathered body to have faith in Jesus. You can live on a desert island alone and go to heaven because you believe in Christ, and that's good news. However, I've noticed in my life and in ministry that the most fruitful people that I know who follow Jesus never follow Jesus alone.
Amen.
They follow with others and are accountable and they're in community. So when someone comes into your office and is like, hey, I'm a Christian, but I don't go to church because the church jacked me up, like, what do you say to them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just kind of piggybacking on what you just said was like God created us to live in community. And I mean, if they have gone through church hurt, I'm not going to immediately force them back into church.
Sure.
I'm not going to be like, nope, you get back into church on Sunday.
Right.
There's some people I can do that too, because I'll be like, well, why don't you go to church? And sometimes it's, well, I was raised Catholic and, I'm not really into that anymore. I'm into this, but I haven't found a church, so there's one thing. But if they've truly experienced church hurt, then I want to talk through that with them. What did they experience? Is what they experienced legit? Is it something that they perceived happened or did it really happen? And not to say their narrative doesn't matter. Their narrative matters.
Sure.
Their feelings need to be validated in that. But then I really talk to them about the community, like you need community. And I can understand if that's not church right now. Sometimes we need to take that break because of the hurt. Even in that break, you need community. So find your people. Find a Bible study that you can join to start with. Find a group of friends that you can go to and talk about Jesus with and your hurts and your struggles and work through it.
Yeah. I think that's really good. I think that is the micro expression of church, right? Wherever two or three are gathered, I'm there in the midst of them.
Right.
So, again, the church is not a building, it's a body. It's a gathering of God's people in a place with the intent of worshiping Jesus.
Yep.
So I think that's really good advice. If they've been hurt by an organized church, not say, well, just go find another church and give it a go. I mean, for some people that may be absolutely the right thing they need to do, but as a general rule, I like that step down of like, hey, find a tribe of people that can come around you, that you can pursue God with, that you can do life with, because that really is living into the essence of what the original church was. Right. All of the formalities and all of the liturgies and all of the things that we know today were just simply like a expanded expression of what the original church was, which was just a couple people huddling together to sing songs, to break bread, to pray, and to talk about the things that Jesus did, that is the early church, and then from the apostles forward to talk about the things they had learned that Jesus had done from the teachings and the writings of the apostles. I mean, it really was a beautiful and blessed thing that was nimble and fast, and it was found conveniently, where today it gets a little more difficult. So let's talk a little bit more about, like, for that individual who is hurt, they're holding on to hurt today. Maybe they're a Christian and they're saying, I do love Jesus. I do want to get back into church, but like something really bad happened to me that I'm just really dealing with. Let's talk about some steps to like try to help them get their bearings. And you talked about one, which I think is probably the first step. It's very important. And that's to not like hide or sweep your feelings under the rug. Right. Sometimes I think we feel like to be Christians, we need to just be like,
we're martyrs.
Yeah, just be an emotional martyr, man. Just pick up your cross, die on it. Don't talk about it because that's a Christian thing to do. That's not the Christian thing to do.
I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. They hurt me, and I'm supposed to turn the other cheek and just let them continue to hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what I would say, and I think our advice on this matter, if you're hurt, is don't take that approach. Don't hide.
Yeah.
Don't sweep it under the rug. I think the saying is really good, and you said it earlier. What you feel is real, but we still need to determine if it's true. And right. So our feelings are real. You're mad.
Yep.
Something happened. You're feeling this feeling.
Yep.
It does not mean it's true.
Right.
Because our feelings aren't infallible. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you should feel that way. But you do feel that way. And it always bugs me when, this happens, I guess, you'll see it in relationships where one partner tends to diminish the feelings they think are irrational and say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Yeah. Okay, you're probably going to get in a fight now, right? I mean, this is what it is. Like, note to the wise, if you say, like, you shouldn't feel that way to your husband or wife, you're probably going to get in a fight. Yeah. It's important to, like, understand and say, okay, I can see that you're angry. Now let's see if that is a right emotion for what just took place. Right. So that requires some conversation. Yeah,
100%. Because you're feeling it, and then you're going to start thinking it, and then you're going to start acting on it. Right. And God doesn't say, take your feelings captive. God says, take your thoughts captive. Right. So this is what I'm feeling. What am I thinking behind that feeling?
So let's talk about that. So taking those thoughts captive is a little bit of a process. It isn't just like believe better thoughts, like thought I have you captive. Like, I don't know.
I'm mad. Now I'll think about rainbows and unicorns.
Exactly. I think that's where it's so easy as Christians to say that kind of stuff and assume that people know what we mean. Okay. And it's something I'm always conscious of as a pastor, as I preach and teach, is to never assume that anyone knows what I'm trying to explain to them with specificity. Like, I have to work hard on simple things. Just living in a post-Christian culture, it's just more and more, we're just seeing that more and more, that the things that maybe used to be well understood a generation or two ago are largely not understood. And that's not a bad thing, because it means we get to retell the story, rewrite the narratives, undo some of the confusion, which I think the world needs deeply, especially pertaining to this. So when we talk about taking a thought captive, it's a little bit of a pathway to defining the pain. Right. We have to define the pain. We know we feel hurt, but we need to define the pain. And there's a few things that I've shared with people, and I want to hear from you. Like, what are the things that you share with people to help guide them through a time like this? But typically when someone comes in and says, I was really hurt by a church, typically my first question is, can you particularize that? Was it the whole church, or was it an individual?
Right. Be specific.
It was an individual.
Be specific.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you share their name? Yes, I can. Okay, say it out loud. And that's even hard for them because that name in their heart comes with so much pain,
right?
That to even say it out loud has brought people to tears in my office, which you really just get the sense of how hurting they are. But I think it's important that we do get specific and say, yeah, it wasn't the whole church that hurt me. In fact, there were lots of loving people that were there and actually were very kind to me almost all the time. Yeah. However, there were one or two individuals that did hurt me. So I get them to be specific and address the who.
Good.
Then we talk a little bit about the how. How did they hurt you? Mm-hmm. Be as specific as you can. Well, they offended me. Well, how did they offend you?
Right.
People have come to me and they've said things like over the years where they will put this into practice and they'll approach me and they'll say, Pastor, something you said on Sunday hurt me in the message. And, my first thought is, did I hurt you or did the word offend you? Right? Right. Because there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I say it all the time, don't kill the messenger. My job is just to get up and let you know what the word says and try as hard as possible to not insert things that I want it to say or think it should say. Yeah. But if I get up and I'm faithful and I say, hey, listen, this is God's standard. And if you're living contrary to it, you are living in sin. Mm-hmm. That is a broken road. You must change. You must repent in order to experience the shalom of God. If that's the case, then I didn't offend you.
Right.
The word offended you, and you're going to have to take that up with management, right?
Good.
I mean, that's the management decision. That's the
I
boss.
like that. Take it up with management.
I'm just down here in customer service trying to work
Here's
things
the form
out.
to fill out and send it upstairs.
So typically it's like, it's like, how did they offend you? Okay, they offended you, but what offended you? Like, be specific.
Yeah.
And, if somebody's like, they say, well, they disregard me. They never pay attention to me. They never ask me my thoughts. Or have you ever had moments like that where people will come in and talk about that kind of stuff that seems maybe grasping for the straw of pain a little bit?
You don't want to say trivial because you don't want to minimize it.
But
yeah. So I mean, and that's the thing. When you come in with that, it's not maybe necessarily that person hurt them. But they hurt them because they poked at a wound that they had from before. Right.
Or they were proud. Pride can be a thing too.
Oh, pride's 100%. It's a huge thing.
I've had people, this is true. And again, I don't minimize this, but I've had this over the years where because I'm a pastor, if I don't wave to somebody in the gathering and they waved at me, but I didn't wave back because I didn't see them. Oh. That genuinely hurt their feelings, and they carry around this pain like I don't like them. And the thing I try to help people understand is if you wave to me, I'm always going to wave back. If I don't wave, it's because I didn't see you.
Right.
And it's hard for them, I think, sometimes to be like, well, how do you not see me? And my answer is, well, there's 600 people here. You know what I'm saying? I see you when I am able to see you. You see me, I'm standing up in front of everybody. I'm one central figure in front of everyone. And it's always surprised me, how much people go in, deep down that road, Pastor Brett doesn't like me. He didn't wave to me.
It's their thoughts,
He didn't smile at me. Yep. I don't know if this is the right church for me. Mm-hmm. He doesn't acknowledge me. It's like, sister, brother, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
I appreciate you as much as anybody else here.
Yep.
Please don't interpret me as not liking you because I didn't wave or smile at you today.
Right. The making assumptions. Don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
And my theory is if there's a question in your head, because Satan loves to get into our heads and mess with our thoughts. And the way he loves to do it most, he doesn't put statements. He asks questions.
Yeah, sure.
Right? To get you to doubt.
Yep.
And then to get you, that's what he did to Eve.
Yeah, very biblical,
are you
right?
sure God
did God
said
really
that?
say?
And then Eve's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so if you have started in your head, well, I think he doesn't like me. As soon as you have that question, you go find the answer. And you go to the source, right? You come to you and say, hey, you didn't wave at me. Do you not like me? You answer that question. You go to the word to answer it. You go to the person to answer it, and you shut the enemy down. Yeah.
So that's kind of that next brave step. How many people do you think would actually do that, though, for that individual who is that self-conscious about I'm feeling pain because I don't think Pastor waved at me? How prone are they going to be to come up to me after a service and be like, hey, I just have a feeling, do you not like me? And I'll be like, what are you talking about? I totally like you. And they're going to say, well, you didn't wave at me. Like, do you think that would be like, just like mad embarrassing for them? Like, do you think they would have the courage to even like step up to the plate on that one?
Yes and no. If you've been in my office a few times, then you'll do it because I'll bug you about it until you do it. I'll have clients who will be like,
if it's bugging you that much,
I knew I was coming back to see you, so I had to call this person and talk to him. But that's pride getting in the way, right? Mm-hmm. That is pride getting in the way.
Yeah.
And we've got to strip ourselves of that pride. No, it's not easy to do. That is hard to do. That is a step of faith. That is putting yourself out there, but it's also doing it how God wants you to do it.
Yeah.
It's living in obedience to Christ. And that's what we're called to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big part of this podcast. That's the whole idea of we said it. We're going to drop some truth on you that you may not want to hear, but we definitely believe it's going to bring you hope. We do believe it's going to set you free. Even the things that we've shared so far, if you're dealing with church hurt, being able to identify like who hurt you, how did they hurt you with specifics, is such a good step of taking a personal inventory and figuring out your feelings and like what's really going on, not just letting all the lies swirl around. And then, like you said, Caroline, taking a step to address that with somebody. I think Satan works so hard, as you said, in that moment where, an individual may say, yeah, I know I should go up and talk to him, but Satan's in their ear like, man, pastor's going to think you are weird. And even if he does actually like you, he's not going to like you after you come up and drop something petty like this on him. Yeah. Keep it to yourself. Sweep it under the rug. And again, that's like with all sin never stays the same size that we swept it under the rug. It always grows. Yep. And same with like worry, same with fear, like any of those things, you sweep them under the rug, they grow. Yep. So this individual who knows they should maybe come up and talk to me just to settle the matter, just to take the ammo out of Satan's hands, listens again to his voice and thinks it quite reasonable. Like, oh yeah, you're probably right. He probably will think I'm a weirdo if I say anything. And then a couple more Sundays will go by where for whatever reason, they're in the back waving like Forrest Gump. And for whatever reason, I do not see them. And again, they're like, this guy doesn't like me. Who is this guy? And then it grows, right? Like, oh, this guy, he doesn't really love me.
And you have no idea what's going on.
I have no idea. They're over there like stirring this concoction of contempt towards me. And I have no idea what's going on. And then at some point, it will bubble over.
Oh, 100%.
It'll bubble over either in the fact like they just won't show up anymore. Yep. And someone will be like, oh, I know so-and-so didn't go to church anymore. And then they'll hit them up and they'll be like, hey, what's up with church? And they'll be like, I don't think Pastor Brett likes me. Yeah. Now, again, you never had a conversation with Pastor Brett about this at all. Right. You were just working off the fuel of lies and misconceptions. And now you left the church. Now somebody calls you and asks you why. And you're like, Pastor Brett doesn't like me. And now you've influenced that person to feel negatively about the church. Right. Now you've allowed Satan to kind of grip their heart and attack any of their insecurities about anything that has happened to them. Yep. To say, yeah, you're right. Me too. And I think that's where it gets so dangerous when we live in hurt because, the old saying, sure, right? Like hurt people. And
but hurt people don't have to hurt people. But people can heal.
That's right. Yeah. Right. But when we're hurt, we do tend to like live and lead from that place of hurt if we're not careful. Right. And that's where we can become a person who divides. Yeah. And, one thing I'm so aware of in the church, Caroline, is that God has so much to say about like people who bring a divisive spirit to the church. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much God's like, listen, I don't take it lightly. Nope. I'm not okay with it. You don't get to be a divider in the body. And I think sometimes when people are hurt, they don't realize they leak that hurt everywhere they go, like a can of oil with a hole in it. Right. And it just slowly leaks oil everywhere around them. And people are stepping in that behind them and they're getting it on their feet. Yep. And they start tracking it around too. Yep. And now God's going to hold that person accountable for that contempt and that leak of disunity. Right.
So right there, that's why you go do the awkward thing and say, Pastor Brett, do you not like me? You didn't wave at me.
Got to do it, right?
You got to do it.
Got to do it. Or at least even approaching and saying, hey, and I've done this before, to be able to say like, hey, can I ask you a question? Oh, sure. This may sound really strange. Right. Maybe I'm just deep in my head or my feelings or something, but are we okay? Like, do you have any negative feelings against me? Most people say, oh, no. Why? Why do you say, oh, this is going to sound weird. I waved to you like 5 times, like 5 Sundays in a row. And like, I was really trying to say hi to you and you didn't say hi back to me. And so that just makes me feel unwanted. It makes me feel unnoticed. Makes me feel that you don't like me because I see you wave to other people. Help me understand, like, is that like directed towards me? And, so being able to approach it with that kind of
right. And that's perfect.
Awareness.
How you said that is like, and I'll tell people that all the time, like, cause they're like, well, like you just said, if I say that, I'm going to sound weird, or maybe they'll think this, then make that part of your thing.
Right.
When you go to them, this is going to
you're
sound
gonna
weird.
Think this sounds weird.
I feel like an idiot,
mm-hmm.
but I don't want the enemy to get a foothold on this. So this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Just be fully honest. You don't have to have some written out, eloquent way of going to talk to the person. Just go talk to them. Be real, be vulnerable, say the silly things, tell them you think it sounds silly, because you're not going to think that sounds silly. You're going to be like, man, I get you.
Yeah. Like, I've never left that moment feeling like, wow, that was, anything but okay. Like, it was good. I'm glad. I appreciated the levity. What I don't appreciate is when people come up to me and like bomb me. Like when they come up, it's like, there's no humility. There's no kindness.
You gotta do it with
There's
humility.
no understanding of like, hey, maybe I don't know the whole story. Let me go talk to him and see if there's something I didn't understand.
Yeah.
There's this complete bravado and pride, and they just want to come over and destroy you.
Yeah. They come with the assumption.
This
is the assumption, and the assumption is their truth.
Yeah, they're right.
Yeah.
And you're wrong.
Exactly.
And nobody else is right but them, and there's nothing else to be said about this.
Don't tell me you didn't see me. I was jumping around.
Exactly.
I was waving.
I know you looked in my direction.
Right. Right.
Which I've had people say that before too, and I let them know, and this is certainly true in my context. It may not be true in every pastor's context, but the way that like the lights hit when you're up on the platform, right?
Yeah.
I can only see like the first 6 rows.
And it's just dark.
Oh yeah. Like so the rest of it is like, if you're back there waving, like, trust me, if it's in service in that moment, I did not see you.
Right.
And
if it's in the middle of your sermon, you're not going to stop and wave at the person.
No, right. Exactly. So it's like, I didn't see you, man. Trust me. Even if I'm looking directly at you, there is a reality that I genuinely did not see you.
Yeah.
So I guess having that humility. So, step 1 of dealing with church hurt is defining the pain. It's getting down to the individual who hurt you. It's being specific about how they offended you, how they broke your trust. What was it? If it's a policy of the church that hurts you, I think that's a whole nother thing, right? Where the church can change something, whether it be a style of worship. It could be a new policy towards elders and deacons.
How many times do people get upset about worship?
Oh, they get upset about worship all the time.
Right.
Like way more than
that's like a whole
I
other
wish
podcast
I had to talk
in
to.
its own. We'll make that its own separate thing.
Somewhere, somehow. But yeah, I mean, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so, people get hurt because something changed, and people don't love change, especially when they're like married to it, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is our tradition. This is how we do things. Don't change it. And then it hurts them, but then they never take the effort to say like, well, help me understand, why did you change this?
Right.
Why did you do this thing? Or why did the leaders make this decision? And anytime anyone has ever asked me that with humility and kindness, our response has always been super gentle, gracious, and ongoing. Like, hey, thanks for asking. There is a story here. Let me share it with you. And after we're done, they still might be like, well, listen, I still don't like the change. But at least I understand the heart for why you changed it. I still may not like it. I still may not agree with you.
Right. But I'm not going to hold on to bitterness and anger about it.
Or live in a lie.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know the story until I just told it to you, and you made your suppositions based on what you think you know.
Yep.
And again, Satan gets a hold of those things. So taking that first step of defining the hurt, for you understanding what was really going on here and how would I bring this to someone's attention, because that's really the effort of step 1, is defining it in effort that you can go to that person, which is step 2, right?
Yep.
And from a biblical perspective, we would just simply call that confronting our pain.
Yep.
And, the Bible has a lot to say about this, but Matthew 18 is a great chapter where Jesus himself is teaching about what to do when our brother or sister sins against us. And
which, isn't that nice that God gives us
a little bit of a
little
recipe to like
checklist,
follow
like,
this.
This is how you do it.
Yeah, until you read the checklist. Then you're like, oh man, that's going to be hard. I'm going to have to talk to people.
Where's the easy checklist?
I'm going to have to own my junk.
Yeah.
God, can't I just pray and you just fix it? Yeah, that'd be great.
Wait, that's not how we do it?
No,
we don't just pray?
I don't think so. I mean, it's powerful and effective, but at the end of the day, like this is Jesus teaching. And I love this says when your brother or sister sins against you, because that can be very general as well. This isn't just, if you were to ask me, this is not just guidance for Christians, though it specifically does speak to the integrity of how Christians handle conflict. I would give the same advice to anyone, whether they're a follower of Jesus or not.
Yeah.
Like this is just good advice that Jesus gives to say, hey, if you want to resolve conflict in your life, here's step one, right? Go to the person who offended you.
Yeah.
And with humility, with kindness, right?
Yeah.
Go to them and address the sin that you feel that they've done towards you, right? Kind of using the specificity of step one to address those questions or that issue. Mm-hmm. So how would you encourage someone when they're going to take this courageous step? They're going to take all the arrows out of Satan's quiver that he's been shooting at them for only Jesus knows for how long, because they've been holding on to this hurt.
Right.
Now they heard this podcast or they read this word, they sense the Holy Spirit saying, this is you. You are going to take a courageous step now to go talk to this individual that hurt you. What does that sound like? Like for the people listening, like what does that sound like from your point of view to start that conversation with the person who hurt them?
Well, I think it even goes back to the uncomfortable conversations that we were just talking about, because you are going to feel maybe silly, but that's not every situation. This might be a big hurt. This might have been something major, like the trauma I was talking about at the beginning. And, oftentimes, of course, we want to take someone with us. It's like a little security there. But that's not what God says. You have to go to them separately.
Yeah, step one.
Yeah. Right? We're not bringing anybody in yet. We're going to talk to this person about it first. It's an uncomfortable conversation. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
This is not easy to do. But nowhere in the Bible does God say being a Christian is easy.
Right.
And so it is putting a lot of prayer into it before you go, that God would keep your heart pure, but that he would also open whomever has hurt you, their heart to the whole situation. And be specific, right? Don't be general with the person.
Yeah.
Well,
you said some stuff.
Like, you said some stuff that hurt.
What did you say? Like, what did I say?
Right. And then
when did I say it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, be specific about it. Don't be accusatory, right? We tend to want to go in and say, you did this, you did this, you did this. We want to point our finger at them. We want to put them down. And it's, when this happened, I felt this way.
Okay.
Get some clarity.
Right.
Because, we keep saying the waving thing is, and I know that sounds silly, but it's an easy example to use. Get some clarity. Did you really not see me? No, I didn't see you.
Yeah.
Like you said this horrible thing, blah, I'm specific about it.
Right.
And the person is like, oh, wow, like that's not what I meant to say, right?
Yeah.
You've got to get clarity in there. So don't come in accusatory and ready to attack. Don't come in with your defenses up. And most importantly, this is for you and your relationship with God, not necessarily you and your relationship with that person. You're doing what's right to keep your line of communication open with Christ.
That's good.
Yeah. This person might not accept that. They might not accept what you're saying. They might deny it. They might get defensive. Oftentimes when someone gets defensive, that comes out of their guilt and shame. Right. And they don't want to own it. Their pride is up. And so you have to go in knowing why you're doing it. I'm doing this because this is what God has called me to do. Not necessarily I'm doing this in hopes that this person will get on their knees and beg me for forgiveness.
Yeah.
That might not happen.
That's very good, right? So be obedient to the word, not because you think it's going to give you a preferred outcome.
Right.
You be obedient because obedience is the preferred outcome.
Yep.
And God works
Amen.
that out, right? So we talk about that a lot in just life and in pastoral ministry to do what is right even when it hurts.
Yep.
Because it's the right thing to do. So if God says, hey, listen, this is my recipe for mitigating conflict in your life, I want you to go and talk to the person who hurt you. And I don't want you to usurp the steps. I want you to do and trust me. That we go and we're obedient and the outcome is the Lord's. That person may say, they may call you everything but a child of God after you come up and you're very humble and you say, boy, this really hurt me. And they may say, oh, what a why would you? They just, and the hurt might get deeper.
Yeah. You took it out of context.
They blew up. Yeah. Now you're even more hurt. My gosh, they didn't hear me. They didn't listen. I did everything, Pastor Brent and Caroline told me to do. And now I'm nothing's working. I read the Bible. I did what you. So then it kind of brings us into step 2, right? Yeah. When we go to that individual, we try to win them over. And I love it that scripture says, when you go to them and you've addressed their sin and how it hurt you, if they listen, you've gained your brother or sister. And I love that Jesus is saying, like, the goal here is to stay in unity and community. It's to stay connected relationally. Yep. You've gained each other. That's good.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So when you go and do that, but the person does not respond in a favorable way, they won't listen, they don't want to listen, which I've seen this happen as well. Then the Bible tells us to go into step 2, which is to bring somebody with you.
Yeah.
And
can we talk about the somebody?
Yeah. Defining the somebody is important.
It really is.
Because it kind of matters.
Right. I'm not going to take my best friend, Sally, who's like all on my side and ready to like burn bridges.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, not wise.
You've told her the story from your standpoint. Yes. Now she's convinced.
Yeah. She's
you're
like, let's go get him. Come on.
Exactly.
We got our pitchforks and our torches.
That is really, really good. And it's super wise in the sense that I think it's natural to want to bring an ally.
Yeah.
Someone that we think is going to back us up, beat this dude down, have our back. But I don't think that's what this is encouraging in Matthew 18. I think Jesus is saying, bring a trustworthy person that is objective, that is wise, that is for unity, not just for you, but they're for unity. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Would you say then we don't tell the person about the situation beforehand? We don't give them the specifics. We just say, hey, I'm being obedient to what God says in Matthew 18. Mm-hmm. I've gone to this person. They didn't receive it well. I need to take someone with me. Mm-hmm. And you don't give them maybe pre-context because, then again, they're seeing your side.
They're making their own assumptions as they hear.
We bring them in completely neutral as someone who hasn't heard what's going on.
I think that would probably be a best case scenario. Yeah, okay. I think that'd be ideal, right? Because you can't be objective.
Right.
If you already have a narrative, that's why you get kicked off of juries.
I was just going to say, it's just like jury duty.
It's like, have you heard the story on the news? Yes, I have. Okay, well, you can't be here now because you have a narrative. Right. So I think that's key. The question is, where do you find those people? Yeah. So you have to have some sense of relationship with this individual if you feel comfortable to go ask them. And that's where I think, the scripture's helpful. It talks about, bringing an elder into this or bringing, and it doesn't just have to be like someone who's ordained as an elder in your church. Yeah. It's bringing someone who has that elder-like heart. It's that elder-like capacity. They're a shepherding person. They love people. Their greatest joy would be to see you and this individual come to resolution. Maybe they've even had some experience. And so, when I've had this happen in ministry, often we direct people to contact their church and say, who is somebody that I could bring into this that could help me?
But what happens when it's a church elder or a church leader that's hurt them and that they're going to?
Yeah, that happens.
And they're not going to want.
No,
they're not going to trust anybody in that church leadership at that point.
That probably takes all people from that. If you're going to be objective. And again, I don't want to speak in absolutes because I'm always very leery about saying definitive things well, there's no one in that church that's going to be helpful.
Right.
There could be someone in that church that's helpful. Mm-hmm. I've just found that word flies pretty quick and people hear things way before you think they hear it. Yeah. And so objectivity goes out the window with it.
Yep.
I've found it in the past that when that's the case, it's helpful to have someone outside of your teepee. Okay. It's outside of your camp, right? Someone who's not in your organization. So that might be leaning into a pastor or someone in another church that you have seen as very fruitful, loving God, loving people, and asking them hey, could you be a bit of a mediator? I have a conflict. I'm looking for someone who's unbiased to help kind of just help us talk about what's going on and to give us a step forward, that would probably be the best place to find someone to help you move forward if the church hurt is directly connected to the leaders of your church.
Yeah, good.
Because otherwise it's going to get divisive too. If you call someone else from the congregation and you're like, hey, elder so-and-so hurt me.
You're right.
Now they can get hurt by the story and maybe not understand. So yeah, it's a delicate thing. But we have to be able to go and have somebody go with us. Have you ever had an experience like in your own life when you had to bring somebody with you to resolve a conflict? Like in your life, not in your practice, but like in your life?
In my life, yeah. I mean, I have had to do that, and it was ugly.
All right.
Yeah, it didn't go. It wasn't the rainbows and flowers and pretty and actually, like, so I went as that second person. Is what it was. Somebody else.
Somebody tapped you on the shoulder. Was like, "Hey, you got to come in on this."
It was a ministry I was leading at the time, and they had gone to the person, and it did not go well, and so they asked me to go with them as the ministry leader, and I did, and it was 2 hours of ugly where I ended up being completely attacked.
Wow.
And all of my stuff ended up coming out. And so, yeah, it doesn't, but we did what we were supposed to do.
Yeah. The outcome is the Lord's, right? The obedience is ours. The outcome is the Lord's.
I mean, it was, I had to go sit in my car and have a good cry and be humble, right? Cause I could have been easily prideful of, I'm doing what God told me to do. And this person is just getting mad and defensive and blah, blah, blah. You know, I had to go sit in the car and be humble and go, let me take this laundry list of stuff this person just threw at me and let me clean my side of the street. Let me check myself and make sure that there's not something I need to go back and apologize for. And there was definitely, you know, stuff I had to go back and say, hey, you were right about this, and apologize, you know, confess and repent. And so, yeah, it's not fun.
It's messy, huh?
Fun. It is messy.
There is typically a message in the midst of the mess, right? As you just shared, sometimes it comes out later, like years later.
Yeah.
You're like, there is no message in this mess, Brett. It's just mess. I've just found that there's always a message in the mess as you sort through those things, as you live in obedience, as you do the hard things. God does bring a testimony out of that he gets glory for. And like you said, it doesn't always equal in reconciliation,
right?
Not immediately, because it takes two parties to reconcile.
Yep.
You can forgive, you can ask for forgiveness, you can own your junk, sweep your side of the street, and their side is still very messy and polluted. And so, you know, for that person who's living in that tension, maybe as we, you know, draw this topic kind of down to a close, what advice would you give them if they've taken the steps, they've tried to do this, and they're just not seeing the outcome? Like, what would you say?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I want to say before you take the steps, if it is something big and traumatic, you might need to seek some healing for yourself before you can go and confront that person, because we don't want to add more trauma on trauma, right? So if you're still hurting and you have these fresh wounds, go seek help to get those wounds started.
Pastor, counselor, somebody to talk to.
Yeah. Not your best friend. I'm not talking about gossip.
Yeah. We don't want a pity party.
I'm not talking about going to the park and talking to all the moms about what happened. I'm talking about, a professional, someone, pastor, counselor, lay person that is willing to do this for you. And then because then they can kind of help walk you through those steps. And so, and if it doesn't end right, it's not, because I want to be like, 50% of the time it ends right, but it doesn't usually go favorable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so you have to trust God. You have to trust that because you've done what God has called you to do, He will be faithful in that. And you might just need to take a step back from that person for a time.
Yeah. And you might have to take a step back from that church.
You might have to take a step back from that church.
The reality is, depending on the situation and the pain, it might be a calling out of, but I found that anytime God calls us out of, He calls us into.
100%.
So for that individual, it's like, well, God called me out of that church. Good. Then He's calling you into another church.
Right. I've experienced that multiple times.
Yeah. You don't get to divorce the bride from Christ.
Right. And this is the thing. We have to remember that it's not God that hurt you.
Right.
It is a fallible human being that hurts you, someone who's full of sin.
Yeah.
And so we can't ostracize the whole entire church because of one person.
Absolutely. So if we were to sum this up into just, I guess, a nutshell, we would just simply say that church hurt often hurts more than physical hurt.
Yes.
Because it's so emotional, because the Christians or the church that we're supposed to be a safe place or a safe person betrayed us, they hurt us.
Yeah.
We have to do the hard work of getting down to what hurt us and why. We have to be courageous to be able to bring those offenses according to God's word to that individual with humility, without as much pride as we possibly can bring into the moment, which will require us really having great talks with God before we have great talks with people.
Strip me of my pride, Lord.
Right? And if it doesn't resolve in that moment, then we have to find that objective person to help us enter into the conversation, because there's no loopholes in love. There's no asterisk in how many times we feel like we have to come back to this. And, Jesus said this, profoundly. How many times must I forgive my brother? 77 times. Okay, well, the idea is ongoing. You keep forgiving because God keeps forgiving you. And so that's the hard thing. But recognizing it's real is the first step, and seeking God's biblical way. Because if you do, it's going to rob Satan of his power to separate you and segregate you out of the body which you are called to belong. And peace is going to start to come to your soul. Healing is going to start to come to your life. Maybe not in a day, but over time. And I believe as you walk this path, it won't be easy, but it's going to be fruitful. And in the end, there, we said it. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We would love for you to continue to follow us and share this content with anyone and everyone you think could use a good laugh and a little dose of hope. Anywhere that podcasts are found. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Search our name to find us. And you can always contact us with questions or things you would like us to cover, perhaps in subsequent episodes, at contact@therewesaiditpodcast.com. We'll link that below for ease of access. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.